During the final arc of Duel Monsters, Yugi Muto devised a cunning strategy in order to defeat Atem and allow for him to move on to the afterlife. This deck was made up of a bunch of different cards and archetypes that, in the anime, worked seamlessly together. But in the real-life TCG version of these cards, they never synergize as much as you'd hope. Thankfully, however, with the release of Shining Sarcophagus, Yugi's deck now actually functions as its own legitimate threat. So here's how it works. By activating the effect of Shining Sarcophagus, you could search for any card within the archetype, but if you have nothing else, it's best to grab Gadget Trio and normal summon them to the field. Because then you can cast Gadget Trio's effect to search for any of the deck's powerful spell or traps. One of the most powerful is Ties That Bind, which you can use to bring out both Silent Magician 0 and Silent Swordsman 0 directly from your deck. This is some great setup, as off of just one card you have a Spell Negate and Silent Magician 0, a negate of anything that targets your Shining Sarcophagus guard with Silent Swordsman 0, and Shining Sarcophagus itself is even a relevant piece of interaction, as if your opponent special summons a monster from the graveyard, you can discard a spell to send it right back. Although if you open a Gadget Trio and a Future Silence alongside your Shining Sarcophagus, you can pivot to an even stronger board. By getting access to Future Silence through either drawing it or through normal summoning a Gadget Trio, you can use this effect to add a Gandora-G, the Dragon of Destruction, from your deck to your hand. Then, because you didn't spend your Shining Sarcophagus search, you can activate it and use the effect to grab Dark Magician, the Magician of Black Magic, and then special summon both it and Gandora to the field. After that, you can use Gandora's effect to wipe your own field, Shining Sarcophagus will remain, but everything else will end up being destroyed, and then you special summon out Silent Magician 0 from your deck. This seems like a huge resource sink, but now you get to trigger the on-destruction effects of your monsters. With Gadget Trio, you get the chance to summon Stronghold, the Hidden Fortress, while with Dark Magician, you get to special summon it back to your field and then use Secrets of Dark Magic directly from your deck, which you can use to fusion summon out Red Eye's Dark Dragoon during your opponent's turn by fusing Dark Magician with Gandora. So if you start out with Gadget Trio and Shining Sarcophagus, you'll end on your most important interaction with the Spell Negate and Silent Magician 0, and a way to counter Graveyard Revival with Shining Sarcophagus. But you trade access to Silent Swordsman 0 for an untargetable negate of any card with Red Eye's Dark Dragoon, and potentially even a Battle Trap and Stronghold. But let's take a look at this deck's ratios to see how this strategy would be capable of taking down the king of games. No matter what, you're always going to be playing 3 Shining Sarcophagus, since it's the heart and soul of the deck. It has an incredible search effect, but it's also a crucial card to commit to the field, as most other cards in the archetype can't function without it being around. As a result, it's a card that you always want to see in your hand. And thankfully, Gadget Trio can also add it, or any other spell or trap card that mentions Shining Sarcophagus whenever they're summoned, giving them crazy versatility, which is why you also play them at 3 copies. Likewise, Future Silence represents any monster you could want, which makes it yet another great playset to include because it's not just a great way of getting to your extenders or payoffs, it's a great way of starting your combo too, since you can also grab Gadget Trio. In general, you always want to see at least one of these cards in your opening hand, as they act as the key pieces that get you to any part of the deck that you could need, while letting you set up Shining Sarcophagus along the way. And as a result of the engine being so accessible, the rest of the strategy actually doesn't play any more 3-ofs, since you can grab your payoffs and extenders whenever they're needed rather than hard drawing them. Gandora is another great example of this. It's a card that has the potential to be an extender when going first, and a game-ending threat when going second. But because it needs some setup, you only play 2 copies of it to search for when you're ready. The same is also true of Ties That Bind, another card with an undoubtedly strong effect that can allow you to swarm the field with your best monsters. But because it requires Shining Sarcophagus and a monster that mentions it on the field, you only play 1 or 2 copies of it most of the time when your engine is already rolling. Likewise, you don't want to go all in the silent monsters either. They're solid enough normal summons and excel as part of an end board, but they don't get you anywhere by themselves, meaning you'd rather summon them from the deck with your combo than open them in hand. Therefore, most pilots have generally landed on playing 1 copy of Silent Swordsman 0 and 2 copies of Silent Magician 0. And to make those silent monsters even stronger, it's a good idea to play 1 to 2 copies of Turn Silence, as it can protect your combo or strengthen your end board. But like the deck's other payoffs, it can only shine if you have set up for it already. And the final 2 of that you should always have in your deck is the strategy's latest boss monster, Dark Magician, the Magician of Black Magic, which you should play alongside either a copy of Secrets of Dark Magic or Destined Rivals, as they're the best usable targets for its effect. That just about covers the more mandatory pieces of the strategy, but there are still some other interesting options available to you if you're willing to commit the deck space for them. Stronghold the Hidden Fortress, for example, is a card that can make your Gadget Trio a little bit stronger, as you can set it from your deck with their effect on destruction, which is why it's sometimes played at one copy. However, because its removal effect is so battle phase oriented, it's usually skipped out on. The same is true of Dark Magic Mirror Force. You can play it at one copy as an option, but it's often not played at all as you have better targets to set with Magician of Black Magic. More Marshmallow is in a similar boat. If you want to get the most out of the card, you can play it at 2 to take advantage of its on-destruction effect, but because its effect isn't game warping, you'll likely only see it at one copy if it's played at all. And last but not least, Archfiend's Advent is a card with the same utility in helping break boards with its Snatch Steal effect, which is why you might play it at 1 as a search target. But it's somewhat a risky card because you might have to use your normal summon on it, which can put into conflict with your Gadget Trio. But let's take a closer look at Yugi's strategy to understand how these cards manage to take down each of Atem's Egyptian god cards. Each of the Shining Sarcophagus cards have unique effects while featuring a plethora of levels, types, and attributes. The strategy doesn't even share an archetypal name between the cards. However, there is one tie that binds the deck together. Every single card mentions Shining Sarcophagus somewhere in its effect text. This is what allows the deck to be as consistent as it is, as every card in the strategy that searches can get you to another card in the archetype one way or another. One of the best examples of this is Gadget Trio. Trio's secondary effect lets you set a Stronghold the Hidden Fortress from your deck whenever it's destroyed, which gives it some fun synergy with Gandora, as after destroying your own trio and adding it in for a Silent Magician 0, you then get some free value from Trio's destruction. But of course, the best part of any gadget is in its search effect, which lets you add either Shining Sarcophagus or any spell or trap card that mentions it from your deck to your hand. Being able to instantly search for your Shining Sarcophagus already makes it a stellar addition to the strategy by itself, but having the option to search for any spell or trap card in the archetype, if you already have Sarcophagus out, makes Trio one of the most versatile starters in the deck, especially given how busted the Shining Sarcophagus back row actually is. And nowhere is that more apparent than with the Ties That Bind. Shining Sarcophagus' version of Ties of the Brethren, that allows you to special summon 2 level 4 or lower monsters from your deck or hand, so long as they mention Shining Sarcophagus. But just like the original, Ties That Bind comes with some harsh restrictions. Not only do you need to control both Shining Sarcophagus and a monster that mentions it to even use it, once it's resolved, you're locked out of special summoning from the extra deck. However, this is often worth it, as Ties is usually going to be one of the last things you do on your turn, as it's best used to special summon out your best level 4 or lower end board pieces. Now, there's currently only 4 potential targets that you can bring out with Ties, but each of these options have their own specific utility depending on the situation. If you haven't used Trio's search effect yet, then bringing them out from your deck can sometimes help you out in a pinch and let you get an extra search if you didn't happen to open them. Alternatively, you could be tempted to bring out a more Marshmallow if you really need to protect your field from battle. But more often than not, the 2 monsters that you'll bring out with Ties are Silent Swordsman 0 and Silent Magician 0, as these monsters give the deck some real interaction without needing to use the extra deck at all. As with Silent Magician, you can shut down an opponent's power spell, while with Silent Swordsman, you can protect your own cards from common removal options. And while the conditions of Ties are quite harsh, they're not as bad as they first appear, as its lock is only for the rest of the turn. So if you have an extra deck play you need to make before using the card, you can combo off prior to using Ties, and then beef up your end board by using it later. Although if you can commit your silent monsters to the field without using Ties, you might be tempted to use your trio to search out a Turn Silence. Turn Silence's effect is pretty inconspicuous, because on its own, all it does is increase the level of face-up monster you control by 3, which is a pretty low impact effect that doesn't seem like it's going to do much to change the tide of a game. However, if you activate it in response to the opponent's monster effect while you have both Shining Sarcophagus and a monster that mentions it, it'll actually negate that effect. This is crazy, as it's just a flat out negate that you can use both on your turn to protect your plays as an in-archetype crossout designator, or to stop your opponent's plays by using Turn Silence in response to their most critical monster effects. It even has a really solid extra effect too, that most people usually forget, as if your Shining Sarcophagus monster battles, you can banish it from your graveyard and just straight up end the battle phase the moment you feel your monsters or your life points are being threatened, putting a stop to an opponent's potentially lethal OTK so that you can make it to your next turn for a counterattack. The only real downside to Turn Silence is that, like Ties That Bind, it needs your board to be ready for it if you want to get the most out of it, which is why it's often better as a card to be added with a Shining Sarcophagus or Gadget Trio when you already have everything else you need to combo. However, not every card that Trio can search is necessarily something you want to play, as both the Shining Sarcophagus trap cards leave a lot to be desired. Dark Magic Mirror Force, for example, lacks utility and has some abysmal restriction requirements, The card's actual effect is pretty great, as it can destroy every one of your opponent's attack position monsters and even burn them for a free 500 points of damage if you happen to control a Dark Magician when it was activated. But to do this, you need to control Shining Sarcophagus, a monster that mentions it, and hope that your opponent either declares an attack or uses a monster effect that would destroy a monster on the field. This is a lot that has to go right if you want to use the card anywhere outside of the battle phase, with its usefulness being determined entirely by what your opponent does, and because it's a card that you'll either be searching with Trio or setting with Magician of Black Magic. Your opponent is going to know what to do to avoid accidentally triggering its effect at a pivotal point during their turn. And while it's nice that you can still use it as a battle trap if they don't play into it, then you're basically just using a more conditional version of Mirror Force at that point without the surprise factor the card is known for. The original trap card of the deck, Stronghold the Hidden Fortress, isn't much better either. It's a trap monster that can summon itself at any point and even has the potential to be an impressive beat stick, as it gains 1,000 points for every Shining Sarcophagus and every monster that mentions it that you control, including itself. But for as powerful of a beat stick as it could be, its effects as a monster are unfortunately weak and easy for your opponent to avoid. It's basically just another battle trick. As well as a monster, if your opponent declares an attack while you control Shining Sarcophagus, you get to destroy that monster. This is far from amazing, especially in a strategy with better battle phase focused effects already available to it, which makes it really redundant even within its own archetype. However, Stronghold has one key point in its favor. It's the only card that you can set with the on-destruction effect of Gadget Trio, so you can technically use it as an extra layer to your end board, although it likely won't be the reason you win a duel. However, one card that you'll be more than happy to use your Trio or Shining Sarcophagus search on is Future Silence, since it has a simple but powerful effect that lets you add any monster that mentions Shining Sarcophagus from your deck to your hand. This gives you yet another great way of accessing any card you could want within your strategy, letting you grab your best extenders and payoffs to fit the game state you're currently in. And the best part is that Future Silence's utility is strengthened by the existence of Gadget Trio and vice versa. You see, while Future Silence is limited to searching only monsters in the deck, you can use its effect to grab Gadget Trio, which can then add Shining Sarcophagus or a spell or trap card that mentions it, effectively making it so that Future Silence can search for your back row if you use Trio as a bridge. And the reverse is also true. Gadget Trio technically only searches for spell and trap cards, but if you really need a specific monster, you can use their effect to add either Shining Sarcophagus or Future Silence, which you can then use to add a monster of your choice. Both of these cards are individually powerful in their own right, and would still be an automatic inclusion in any Shining Sarcophagus strategy if the other didn't exist. But both of them being search spells within the same deck gives you some near constant consistency. And all of this utility comes without even thinking of the second half of this effect. You see, if you activate Future Silence in the main or draw phase, then it's just a simple search spell. But if you activate it in the battle phase, then after you add, you can make it so both players draw until they have 6 cards in their hand, mimicking the anime effect of Card of Sanctity. This half of the effect isn't the main reason Future Silence is crazy, but it opens up some extra OTK lines as it happens to synergize incredibly well with Silent Magician 0. Because whenever your opponent draws a card while you control Silent Magician 0, you get to increase their level by the number drawn, which seems like it doesn't do much at first. However, Magician 0 has a continuous effect that makes them gain attack equal to the difference between their current level and original level times 500. This includes when your opponent draws a card for turn, but also means that if your opponent is forced to draw by the effect of Future Silence, then you have the potential to increase Silent Magician 0's attack by 3,000 with just one card. And while giving your opponent 6 cards for free would usually be a huge downside, if you can get lethal on board, card advantage won't matter too much. Although this OTK is just a bonus. Silent Magician 0's main strength is actually that it's one of the best interactions the deck has available in Archetype, as if your opponent activates any spell card or effect, you can negate it at quick effect speed so long as you control Shining Sarcophagus, and then increase Magician 0's level by 1. Like with Turn Silence, Magician 0's negate comes with dual utility. You can use it to disrupt your opponent's best spell-based playmakers by negating the likes of Branded Fusion or Emergency Teleport, which can do a lot to help prevent your opponent from building their board. Or you can use it to protect your own field from your opponent's best board breakers, using Magician 0's negate to prevent a triple tactics talent from resolving so that you can keep using your monsters, or stopping a Harpy's Feather Duster that would clear away your Shining Sarcophagus and the rest of your back throw. And it's this general usefulness that makes Silent Magician 0 a priority to bring to the field. It's not a turn-ending card that wins games on its own, but when used with the deck's other endboard pieces, it becomes a genuine threat. And Silent Swordsman 0 makes for some great backup. Swordsman's effects are similar to Magician's, but they have their own unique quirks. Instead of increasing their level whenever their opponent draws a card, Their level gets increased by 1 during each standby phase. And like Magician, Swordsman also gains attack equal to the difference between its current level and original times 500. But instead of negating an opponent's spell effect, Swordsman can only negate effects that target either Shining Sarcophagus or one of your Shining Sarcophagus monsters. And then after you negate that effect, Swordsman level is increased by 1. Between the two silent monsters, Swordsman 0 is definitely the weakest, as its effect is a lot more specific and conditional. With Silent Magician 0, you're basically guaranteed to get value of its negate because of just how common powerful spell cards are. Meanwhile, for Silent Magician's negate to be useful, you need to hope that your opponent targets your Shining Sarcophagus cards, which they're less likely to do when the threat of Swordsman is clear. However, Swordsman is still a solid feature as part of an end board. It might not be able to stop an opponent's powerful playmaker, but it can prevent your Silent Magician from being negated by an infinite impermanence, stop a Fenrir from banishing your Gandora, and even ensure that your Shining Sarcophagus is safe from a Cosmic Cyclone, keeping your other interactions online. On its own, it's easy to see Swordsman as a card that might as well be a vanilla beatstick. But just like how Silent Magician 0 is strengthened by the other Shining Sarcophagus pieces existing on your end board, Silent Swordsman being on field buffs the staying power of everything else you have. More Marshmallow is in a really similar position to Swordsman. By itself, it's clearly a pretty terrible card, but if you can commit to the field alongside an end board, it can make things pretty difficult for an opponent in the right game state. Because while it's on the field and you control Shining Sarcophagus, More Marshmallow can't be destroyed by battle, and your opponent won't be able to target any of your Shining Sarcophagus monsters for attacks other than More Marshmallow, effectively making it so the rest of your end board won't be beaten over. But if your opponent tries to destroy More Marshmallow, or even if it's destroyed by your own Gandora, More Marshmallow will summon a second copy of itself from your hand, deck, graveyard, or banishment, and then inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. And unlike the original, you don't need to set this More Marshmallow to protect your life points, as if you control Shining Sarcophagus, you get to special summon it out during your opponent's turn at quick effect speed. If you can get a More Marshmallow into your hand or into your end board, it's undoubtedly a positive effect that buffs your monsters by making it hard for your opponent to use the battle phase as an effective resource, as it blocks your opponent from OTKing you and keeps your monsters safe. And it can be especially infuriating to an opponent if you're playing multiple copies of it to take advantage of its on-destruction effect to keep it on the field no matter what. But for as funny as More Marshmallow is, like with the deck's battle traps, it's outclassed by Turn Sign's graveyard effect, which can basically stop your opponent from having the battle phase at all. More Marshmallow isn't an awful choice by any means, but because its specific niche is already filled, and because you'd rather spend your search effects on other cards, it's best to see it more as an option that you can tech in for certain metas, rather than as a mainstay of your engine. Archfiend's Advent is much the same. Its effects are quite strong and can do a lot to help Shining Sarcophagus strategies when going second, because whenever Advent is normally special summoned to the field, you get to target and take control of one of your opponent's monsters, with the only restriction being that if you don't have Shining Sarcophagus up when you use the effect, that monster can't attack. But if you did control Shining Sarcophagus, you can use your opponent's boss monster against them, and it'll be even stronger, as Advent gives it a 500 attack buff to every other monster you control. All of this sounds incredible, but Advent has one key issue. Unlike the deck's other high-level payoffs, it can't special summon itself to the field if you control Shining Sarcophagus. Instead, it lets you normal summon it without tributing. This puts Advent in direct conflict with the best normal summon of the deck, Gadget Trio, which can make for some awkward second hands where you have to decide between getting more engine or trying to force out interaction from an opponent. Still, Advent is great to include in your list if you're willing to commit a single deck slot to it so it can be searched at the right moment, as against certain end boards, Advent is a huge threat. For example, if you target an opponent's 3200 attack Appaloosa, they're basically forced to negate your Advent, which will end up reducing their attack to 2400. Low enough for you to be able to threaten the battle phase, beat over 3 negates worth of monster, and continue playing in the main phase too. Now while Advent focuses on breaking boards, Dark Magician, the Magician of Black Magic, helps you make them. You can summon out this version of Dark Magician from your hand so long as either player controls a Shining Sarcophagus. And while it's on the field, Magician of Black Magic becomes the ultimate wizard in terms of attack and defense by changing its name to Dark Magician. But this version of Dark Magician isn't vanilla, because if it's destroyed by a card effect and there's a level 5 or higher monster in the field, you can special summon Magician of Black Magic back to the field and then set a spell trap card that mentions Dark Magician directly from your deck. This effect seems really conditional at first, but it's simple to trigger, as the main way you'll be using this Dark Magician is by destroying it with the effect of your level 8 Gandora-G, which you'll be using anyways to get Silent Magician 0 from your deck. Now, you could use this effect to set Dark Magic Mirror Force if you happen to be playing it, but given how awkward it is to use, it's better to set a piece of Dark Magician focus back row that better synergizes with Magician of Black Magic. One of these options is Destined Rivals, a Dark Ruler No More on a trap card that negates the effect of every face-up monster your opponent controls, which is an excellent piece of interruption that's going to be hard for your opponent to play around since you can activate at any point during their turn, giving you the opportunity to blanket negate an entire board. However, more commonly, you'll see Secrets of Dark Magic set because you can fuse away your Dark Magician with your Dragon effect monster in Gandora on your opponent's turn to summon out a Red Ice Dark Dragoon, an untargetable, indestructible omni-negate that can apply a ton of pressure. You won't be able to access Dragoon's removal or burn effects because you didn't use a normal monster as a fusion material, but having a more universal piece of interaction does an amazing job of backing up your silent monsters, and making the Shining Sarcophagus end board even more threatening. But in order to get to Dragoon, you'll need to bring out Gandora-G, the Dragon of Destruction. Thankfully though, Gandora is one of the best cards in the whole strategy, as it's capable of acting as a way to break your opponent's board, make your own, or even both at the same time. Gandora can special summon itself out to the field for free so long as you control a Shining Sarcophagus. And while it might seem pretty weak for a boss monster, it gains 300 attack for every banished card. But the most busted part of Gandora is its other on-field effect. By paying half your life points, you can destroy every other card in the field, and banish them in the process. Then afterwards, you get to special summon any level 7 or lower monster that mentions Shining Sarcophagus from your deck, and then you increase that monster's level by the number of cards destroyed. This is an amazing way to clear away a board, as with just one effect, you can wipe every one of your opponent's on-field resources, monsters, and back row alike, banishing them so they can't use their graveyard effects while you're furthering your own resources with a free summon from your deck. As a result, Gandora is an absurd OTK enabler. Every card it banishes is only going to buff its attack, and even if you can't reach lethal with it alone, you can supplement it with the monster you summon from your deck, which can be especially devastating if you summon out a silent monster that can take advantage of the levels that Gandora will give them to increase their attack to a deadly degree. But the crazy part about this effect is that it's not just good going second. You can use it when going first to further your plays and access your best endboard pieces. While on paper it's costly to wipe away your own field, the advantage you get from Gandora's summon, as well as the on-destruction effects of certain monsters, makes it more than worth it. Now, you might be worried about the idea of destroying your own Shining Sarcophagus, given how the entire deck needs it to be on the field to function. However, Sarcophagus actually can't be destroyed by any monster effects, including your own. So you're free to use Gandora without giving up the best card in the archetype. Which brings us to the last and most important card of the deck, Shining Sarcophagus. Like we talked about before, it can't be destroyed by monster effects, but it also has two other astonishing effects. Its third effect is pretty specific since it requires that your opponent special summons a monster from the graveyard. But if they do, you have a chance to discard a spell card to send that monster right back, mirroring how Gold Sarcophagus managed to defeat Slifer in the ceremonial duel. And this is a really solid extra effect that will often catch an opponent off guard, especially in strategies reliant on using the graveyard as a resource. It's definitely not guaranteed to come up in every game, but in the modern era, it's not uncommon to see your opponent bring out bodies from the graveyard, so having a way to remove them from the field before your opponent gets to use their effect, or for using them for an extract play, can be game-changing. However, this effect is just a bonus. The part of Shining Sarcophagus that makes it such a great card for the archetype is its second effect, which lets you add any card that mentions Shining Sarcophagus from your deck to your hand. Earlier, we talked about how amazing it was to have both Gadget Trio and Future Silence as searches for the strategies, as one can bridge you to the other, and get you to any card in the archetype. But with Shining Sarcophagus, you don't need any kind of bridge, as it can natively grab any card that we've discussed in this video, whether you need a turn silence for a negate, a Dark Magician or Gandora to get the materials ready to summon Dragoon, an Archfiend's Advent so that you can break a board, or Ties of the Bind so that you can make one. If you have a Shining Sarcophagus, the whole deck is at your fingertips. Which is why it's the perfect card for the strategy to have been built around. You see, usually it would be a huge detriment for a deck to need a specific card at all times for it to be useful, as you'd have to go out of your way to get on the field as quickly as possible so the rest of your deck can work, which can make trying to work with the strategy a little awkward, especially if the card you need doesn't do much. But with Shining Sarcophagus, you're immediately rewarded for putting it on the field with the ability to customize your hand as you see fit. All the while, you're fulfilling the conditions for some of the best cards in the archetype simply with it existing on field, which makes it a card you're hoping to see in your opening hand, and one that you're always willing to search for. Overall though, Shining Sarcophagus is a fun and shockingly capable recreation of Yugi's ceremonial duel. Every card carries the spirit of their older versions while also synergizing together as a complete deck in an impressive way. forming a solid resource loop with its searching, giving it an incredible grind game to back up a really solid endboard. The deck isn't perfect, as in certain formats its endboard interactions are a little weaker than you'd hope, and because of your limited access to the extra deck, you have a pretty linear and focused game plan. And even despite those weaknesses, Shining Sarcophagus has proven itself more than worthy to take on both the current meta, as well as the king of games.